Start off first by welcoming you to our first virtual design mentor event. My name is Suzanna Smith, and I'm the Director of Design here at Carbon 5, and I'm going to be moderating this chat. We normally hold these events in person in our office, so this is our first outing, doing it in an all virtual setting. We have offices in San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, Seattle, and Chattanooga. One of the benefits I was thinking about is that today we have designers from almost every office. We actually don't have a designer in the Seattle office, so I should rephrase that as we have a designer from each of our offices represented here. So it presents a nice opportunity to connect across the whole company in a way that we don't normally get to do. I have a few housekeeping items to run through before we begin. We're going to have our panelists today weigh in on questions you submitted during the event registration. And so the topics are going to span gaming experience in general and transitioning into the field of UX, building strong design portfolios and writing design case studies, working successfully in this new all remote and virtual world, tools and trends, things that are working well in this time, tools to identify trends, and general US process questions. So we're going to try to cover a lot of terrain that hopefully will be helpful and interesting to you as a designer wherever you sit on the spectrum of experience and in your career. If you have additional questions, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. We'll also try to catch them if you put them in chat. We're going to try to get through as much as we can, and whatever we don't get through, we'll follow up with a blog post on carbon5.com and try to get some additional perspectives from our panelists. So really quickly, before we begin, I want to give you a little background about Carbon 5. We're a digital product development consultancy, and we partner with a wide range of clients to create exceptional products and help them and create with them exceptional and effective teams. We have 9 designers, and we work on products across a wide range of industries. And we work directly with founders and product owners, and we really thrive when we're pairing closely with product managers and developers in these cross-functional teams. Sometimes those from Carbon 5 or also on the client teams. So we can speak a lot to working in cross-functional teams. I'm looking forward to a great conversation today with everyone that you see up on your screen. We are just showing our own faces to focus the conversation a little bit. I wish we could see all of your faces, so definitely say hi in the chat. Trying out this format. Today, joining us, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but really quickly, we have Elias Crouch, and you can wave just so they know which one you are. We have Mandy Valladares, Nicole Thayer, who I might call Nikki over the course of the call, and Ben Dix. And so yeah, I'm going to have everyone introduce themselves, and I was thinking maybe you can briefly share your background that led you to Carbon 5, the types of projects you've worked on here, how long you've been here, and something that you enjoy about being a designer at a consultancy. So we can, why don't we start with Elias, and then we can just bounce it around to everyone, and then we'll start diving into the questions.
Cool. Hello, everyone. Thanks for showing up. I'm Elias Crouch. I'm a designer at Carbon 5. I've been at Carbon 5 for about 8 years now. Before that, I was an independent contractor doing web and identity work for many years before that. And one of the things I like working at Carbon 5 is just getting to switch up and work on new projects and tackle new problems. That's one of the great things about it. And I've worked on, I think, pretty much every type of product problem we've had over the years here. That's it for me.
Do you want to send it to Nicole?
Sure, I can take it. Hi, my name is Nikki Thayer. I've been at Carbon 5 for coming up on around 5 years, and I have around 10 years of experience doing user experience design total. So I got my start working at ed tech companies and really small startups. But before that, I was a children's book illustrator. So my sort of design story has been learning to come from the sort of anything can happen world of imagination into very little can happen. This is a banking app. For things I really like about consulting at Carbon 5, I really like being able to work on a wide range of products, like Elias said, but I also really like how much access and collaboration I have with developers. Being able to actually participate in making something that ships rather than sort of keeping it in the realm of ideas is really exciting to me. I'm going to pass to Ben.
Cool. Yeah, so I am a designer based out of Chattanooga. And my background is kind of similar to Elias's. I have maybe 8 or 9 years of experience prior to being a UX designer as kind of a branding designer slash in-house marketing designer. And so it's been an interesting transition into UX, but I really like it. And Carbon 5 has been an awesome fit for me. And I think one of the things I enjoy about working in UX and working at Carbon 5 is that the work I do as a designer is directly tied and grounded to user needs and business needs and goals. So that just sort of like underpins all the work we do, and it just feels a lot more meaningful, and you can have more objective conversations with clients and collaborators about your work because it's all sort of grounded in that thinking. So that's it for me. How about Mandy?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Mandy. I've been at C5 for a little less than a year, I'd say. But overall, my product design, I guess, years of working in product design and UX, been about 5 to 6 years or so. Some of my background, I started studying architecture and soon found out that there was a lot that goes into it and you couldn't really iterate or adapt based on learning. So I ended up going to General Assembly. I did their course. Cooper in San Francisco also offers interaction design courses. So I just did a bunch of those and just tried to get as much knowledge as possible. And then was able to work at one startup, and then went to JP Morgan for about 4 years, and then started to get into the agency consulting world. And so at C5, I would say probably the most intriguing thing, as well as what I've learned so far in my year of being here, is just what it means to have a product market fit and how to prioritize the smallest product that can hold up in the market. And it's really about, going from banking and then just other projects that we have here. It's very much of like, what do we need? What is critical? What do we need to get out the door? And really having some influence in product decisions, in addition with technology and the product owners. And really it's about, technology powered solutions and how do you work in that world and how do you design and be a contributor in that sense. So that's been really great, big learning experience for me, and I'm definitely enjoying it. And to some of the other points, it's really great to see work out there in people's hands. It's probably the most exciting part about it for sure. Yeah, that's it for me. And then Suze,
yeah. Thank you. I just realized I didn't really say anything about myself, but it's cool to hear you guys all describe everything. And I would just, say that my favorite part of working at a place like Carbon 5 is the opportunity to be a really strategic designer and a thinking partner with a product owner and with our stakeholders in helping them define their product. And I really like the upfront part of a project when you're helping them understand their users and helping them with a lot of prioritization around how to take their big ideas and start putting them in order so that we can start breaking it down and moving into developing a product. I've been at Carbon 5 for 10 years as of this month, and my path leading to Carbon 5, I actually came to Carbon 5 directly from a startup that had hired Carbon 5 sort of as a Hail Mary effort. So I had a chance to be on the other side of the fence and work with our developers and pair with them. Prior to that, I did a little bit of other consultancy work in UI and UX. And before that, had a stint for many years right out of college working at Sun Microsystems. Now a defunct company, but a really big company once upon a time. So started my career doing UX design in enterprise world. I should mention that Nancy Samahito, she's here, she has her camera off, but she's our head of marketing, and she's the one that sort of kicked off the whole meeting. So that's who this mysterious Nancy Samahito is. Anything that goes wrong, you can pin on her, and all the mysteries, it's all Nancy behind that black screen, but she's our wonderful marketing person helping us pull all this together. Why don't we've already touched on sort of some of the subject matter in a lot of questions. Why don't we dive in first in the areas of sort of beginning and gaining experience, which also includes some questions about transitioning into UX. So I'm going to put this question out and maybe send it first to you, Mandy, but I think anybody please jump in. And Ben, you also indicated some interest in sort of talking about building portfolios for beginners. So one of the first questions that someone submitted was, as a junior designer, how can you gain relevant work experience that hiring managers and product designers would take seriously? And I'll dovetail that question with, what does it look like for beginners to start building a portfolio, and what can they put in it? And after we talk about these questions, we'll sort of segue into, and you can do this without me prompting you, segue into also what does it look like to transition from another area of expertise, or be specifically design or not, into UX.
Yeah. So for that first question of how do you gain relevant work experience when you're first starting out, and how can you move the needle and have folks recognize that? I was definitely in that position, I'd say about 5 years ago. So, you know, you take some courses, you go to school, you graduate, but then the actual work experience isn't very high. So how do you stand out amongst the rest? And I would say the most important thing is definitely to key into either your strength or what you have most interest in. When starting out, there's like 2 pillars you can really build on, and that's interaction design as well as visual design. So depending on where you lean or where you have more interest in, definitely showcase those skills in whatever way possible. So typically the way that people are discovered is through a portfolio. So in a portfolio, you could have various case studies, but in those case studies, you definitely want to tell the story of your problem solving skills, because essentially that's what we do. We solve problems on the day-to-day basis, whether it's really big or really small. And so for people who are just starting out, it could be a smaller set of problems you would want to solve. One example that I've seen someone do before was taking, I think this was a blog post many years ago, but a young girl saw that Dropbox interactions were just a little bit weird. It was hard to navigate. So she took that, she went to Starbucks, got people and just asked them a bunch of questions, did a really small like user test, and then went back on her site and said, this is what I heard from people. This is how I think this can be approached, and here's how I solved it. And that's like a really great story in itself, to want to identify the problem, ask people's opinions and what they think, get user feedback, and from those learnings, come up with solutions and then present those solutions. And essentially that's what we do, like on a loop. Like that is the discovery loop that we do. So being able to have that in a nutshell and be able to present that is probably one of the most impactful things you can do. And it's okay if it hasn't been a part of something that's shipped or a part of a company that you've worked with. If it's just something that you've seen, you're able to at least show and prove that you have those skill sets to be applied. I think when I was first starting out, my mindset was like, just give me a chance. Like, I just need someone to just give me the opportunity. I know I can do it. And a lot of it just shows through your work and how you present yourself and how you speak to these things, and the knowledge of what's happening now. Like, what not necessarily are the trends, but what are different companies doing? What are different tactics and good like working practices that you've seen? What blog posts are you reading? What people are you aware of? I think knowing what other companies are doing and what's really standing out in the industry also helps. Yeah, so that's my answer to that one.
You reminded me of someone who he became a product owner. He's actually someone we've worked with in the past who founded Masterclass. But he began actually by going to the airport and just observing baggage claim and like just observing all the pain points that exist within the baggage claim section of the airport, and then coming up with ideas and solutions. And there's some questions further down about what unique problems are designers working on, or what presents itself during this pandemic time. And I'm thinking about airports and how they're empty now, but how they've been so impacted by the pandemic, and just pondering life now and how it's been impacted by the pandemic, and what is hard now. If you were starting out and you needed subject matter, I think there's like so many aspects of life now that have been altered, and how might we do something better during this time of trying to create social distance, or successfully work while sheltering in place, or something. That it seems like life at this very moment is ripe for redesign. Would anybody else like to, we can segue into building portfolios, and anybody else like to dovetail on what Mandy's put out there?
Let's keep moving.
Cool, nice. Okay, so some of the next questions, we will pick up the topic of portfolios and case studies further down. Oh, good, I see somebody. Thanks for submitting that question, Gentile. I'm gonna keep my eye on the Q&A section, so if things emerge for you as we're talking, feel free to put them there. And we are gonna talk about remote research. So let's move into transitioning into the field of UX design from other fields. And we've got some questions. Can you provide tips for switching into UX design from a non-technical background? And then we have someone else who asked a question, I think it was June, let me see here, about switching into the field of UX from another area of design. So we've got a question from someone, Cindy Clark, and also June Chun, about transitioning into the field of UX. Ben, can you speak to that?
Sure, yeah. Great questions, and I feel like they're very similar. So I'm just gonna kind of lump them all together. So yeah, I had this experience myself. As I mentioned, I was in design, but in more of a kind of traditional field of design for several years. I think the first thing to acknowledge is that this is different than other forms of design. It is going to require a shift. If you have a visual design background or a footwear background, there is going to be a pivot. Things are going to feel different. But the cool thing is that in the UX space, there is just so much knowledge that is shared online and through books and other resources, podcasts, that it's a really cool profession to dive into, because you're not dealing with a lot of unknowns. You're in the art world or the design world. People are very kind of protective of their methodologies and how they get inspiration. People want to are very guarded about that. But with UX design, and I think as it is a close relative to software development, people are just very methodical about it and very sort of open source. So I think that's one of the big things for me, was just accessing those resources very early on, reading books, being super proactive about that, reading blogs. There are some good kind of boot camps online. You don't have to pay a whole lot of money to do kind of a simple boot camp remotely. I think those can be valuable. But I think as a sort of a second point, I think there's truly nothing better than like getting that real life experience. And I know that's a chicken or egg situation, but it kind of goes back to Mandy's point about developing your portfolio. You have to be proactive and be creative with how you come up with those situations that kind of help you build those UX muscles. And those were muscles, honestly, that I felt fairly confident with myself as a visual designer, brand designer to some degree. But doing user research is a whole new ballgame. So you have to be intentional about it. But I think I would just be encouraged that there are tons of resources out there. People in the industry are eager to help and mentor. So I think mentorship is a great approach. And just kind of talking to people in that world, talking to developers, learning how to take a concept that might be kind of abstract in your mind, learning how to translate that to something that's built with developers is a key skill for what we do. I mean, that's what we're doing day in and day out. We're not dealing with the conceptual. We're dealing with like stuff that we can actually build. So that's my vague, multifaceted answer. Oh, you know, sorry, one last thing I want to add, and this goes back to Mandy's point. I think leaning on your strengths, I think that first barrier of like, oh, I don't have the UX knowledge, that is a barrier at first, and it can be intimidating. But once you get over that a little bit, I think realizing that, hey, I do have a background that is unique, whether it's in design or art or writing or something very different, that experience, that life experience can absolutely play into your role as a UX designer. And I think if you stay, you know, you need to be a generalist UX designer to some degree, but if you have that sort of secret power as a visual designer, as a footwear designer who understands, you know, design in that certain way, that can absolutely come in handy. So don't squash that.
Yeah, Nikki, you look like you had something you were.
Oh, yeah, I wanted to build a little bit on Ben's point and really encourage people who are coming into user experience design to solve problems that they don't know the answers to right up front. And sort of the good news about being early in your career is that there are going to be a lot of problems without clear solutions offered to you. And working through something where the end is unclear, and telling the story of how you went from really being unconfident in an answer to gathering evidence and gathering experience that helps you arrive at a clear solution is going to be a really powerful story to tell. And you don't need to know that much when you start in order to end up with that story.
Yeah, nice, thank you. We have a question Cindy submitted. I'm bouncing between questions that have been submitted ahead of time and then ones you guys are putting in on the fly. Elias, I wonder if you could field this, because I know you've thought a lot about our interview process here at Carbon 5, our design interview process. What are some common interview questions that someone should be ready to speak to? And maybe questions are also just activities or conversations, like what should somebody be ready to, how to present themselves in design interviews?
All right, well, I think they're dependent on the position you're going for to start with, but I think on a whole, every designer should come to the table with the examples of things that went incredibly wrong and then how they either fixed it and what they learned from that. And I think something that people are always looking for is humility and something where the people actually take ownership for something that went wrong, because I think that's something that we all deal with at certain points in our careers. Also, I think another thing is where things went really well and where you were like kind of proved your mettle as a designer or whatever it was that you were doing as an example. It doesn't even have to be in design field. It's about how you work with people and how you problem solve and, you know, arrive at success. And I think another thing that is really crucial for designers when they come in and we're looking at case studies and work that they've done, case studies tend, after you've looked at hundreds of them, they tend to all look the same. So you want to try to figure out ways that you can make yours unique and original, and Squarespace does a great job of making everyone look homogenized. So you have to figure out ways that you can kind of push yourself through that. And then additionally, designers tend to, I think it's like just be super honest with where you were as a team member on any of the case studies you did. So if you were a junior designer and you're saying that I did a little bit of stuff, but just be honest with what you're taking ownership from, and say, give credit to the people that were on the team that helped you get there as well, because it's rare, unless you're an independent contractor, that you actually did all of it yourself. And so being cognizant of the fact that you're working with a team and sharing that with everyone as well. Those are my hot tips and hot takes for that question. Thanks.
Yeah, I would say that just somebody's ability to talk about where they sit on the team and the successes of the team, and to like observe and bear witness to what made a team work well and all the pieces that come together. Like Elias is saying, a successful design solution, it's hardly ever arrived at all by yourself, all alone. It's just the combination of all the thinking and prioritizing and co-creating from a team. And so it's valuable to me to talk to someone about their experience within a setting like that, even if you weren't the everything that arrived at the solution. That we learn a lot about you as a thinker and a communicator and a collaborator by hearing, you know, your take on what occurred on a team and how a team solved a problem. Let's see here. I feel like there was a good segue from that. Well, Elias touched on case studies. I think we'll come back to that. Let's just keep talking about experience for a moment, and then we'll get a little more brass tacks. There's a question here, something that I've grappled with a lot. I'm going to send it to Nikki. I think she and I were even sort of talking about this. I think we're still talking about this, but what are your thoughts on niche designers and multidisciplinary designers?
It's a big topic. I think to sort of ground my response, Carbon 5 definitely puts a big emphasis on generalists, people who are full stack, people who can sort of accept whatever gets thrown at them. I would hypothesize that the spread between niche designers and generalist designers is really a function of the size of the company. So in larger companies with more tightly defined roles, those are places where you have opportunities to get very, very in depth and really specialize in a certain skill. And that can be really powerful because that means you completely own that topic. That means that you're the person that people come to for that specific thing, rather than sort of having a reputation in that way. That said, I would definitely consider myself much more of a generalist. And one of the things I really love about that role is that so much of the job of a generalist is synthesizing. It's pulling different terminology that's accomplishing similar things and different threads out of different conversations and saying, like, these things you thought were really different might not be so different. They might be really sort of similar end goals with a couple of different nuances, like contextually. And I think those moments where people who you thought were really different from you aren't as different as you thought are really, really exciting to me. So for consultancy, I would say that generalists are definitely highly valued because you're easier to put on projects. But I really don't want to diminish the role of being able to definitively own a category.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Does anybody else want to layer onto that before we move on? No. I mean, I have a question. Oh, go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I was going to follow up. I mean, it almost feels like a cliche now, but the whole IDEO approach to hiring people, I'll just say it anyway, is really that kind of T-shaped designer, where you can go broad and you can be that generalist, but you do have a specific skill set that you are stronger at than others, that people can really rely on you to kind of go deep on. I think is really valuable because there's just always those times where those skills are needed. So I always get concerned when people are so focused, especially as young designers, on being a generalist. I would suggest keep that generalist instinct, but still go deep on something.
Yeah. There's a question here. Where did it go? About providing advice. Here we go. From Manjiri. I hope I'm saying your first name right. Manjiri asks, what advice would you give to senior designers looking to further their career? So I think we've been talking about a lot about the beginning part of a career, but you know, if you're well established, what advice would you give? I can lead with a couple prompts. I mean, what I've been experiencing recently is like some heftier and harder and more nebulous conversations, and participating in those, like taking a lead on what it means to be a designer and really grapple with equity or intersectionality or you know, some of the things occurring in our society and designing for good. I think somebody else asked a question further down, but what comes to mind for you guys? You all are seeing, you are looking at a screen full of senior designers. What's been helpful to you at this point in your career? I'm gonna throw that to Elias.
Can you restate the quick question? Something
Sure.
cut out at the beginning of it.
No worries. What advice would you have for senior designers looking to advance their career?
I think just a general like.
Oh, that's such a deep thought. That's such a, and he's so thoughtful. That's Elias for you. There he is. Wait, you're back. Say that again. Oh my goodness. Okay, Elias, I'm gonna direct it to somebody who's still moving on
move on to the next question.
Screen, and then we'll come back to you for more deep thoughts. Mandy.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts. And it's funny, I was talking to my friend about this too. So she's at a bigger enterprise company, and it's basically like when you progress in your career. So when you're first starting out, it's like the execution, the chops, the skills to be able to, you know, execute, solve the problem, talk with people, you know, tell the story, craft the story. But then what happens once you've sort of like mastered that or become really good at that? What is the next step? And at the company that she's at, it's like, well, you can either people manage or you can just be a master at the craft. So those are definitely like two segues there of, do you want to help mentor and work with people and help them with their career as they progress? Or do you want to continue? And in that continuation, well, what does that even mean? And I think for me now at Carbon 5, a lot of it now is around being able to thoughtfully direct the team and ask probing questions and kind of like plan and strategize what are the next best steps and why are they valuable, versus taking the objective or the challenge and then executing. It becomes now a mix of just being that extra mind to just be like, is this the right thing to do? Is there another way to approach it? How could we think about it in this way? And just kind of pushing that a little bit more. And I mentioned this before a little bit now is like, well, what are the other skills? One skill that I've mentioned is around just a product mindset and what does it mean to be a viable product in the market that will make money, that's valuable, that people will want to buy. And those are different kinds of questions, and that's a different, you know, sector to understand a little bit more. And then you could argue that actually I really like the technical route and, you know, what are developers doing and how can I speak their language or know what's happening, because we work in this, you know, we have a give and take relationship there to solve a problem. So it really depends on which pillar you're looking to dive deeper into. But I think ultimately it's like, what is that next level of guidance and leadership, essentially. Yeah.
Thanks, Mandy. Elias, are you back with us? I think you are. Yeah.
I think I am.
You are. Welcome back. Do you remember the question? Advice for senior designers.
Yeah, just showing like concise, thoughtful work, having a tighter portfolio, also concrete examples of how you own products. Additionally, like if you have any like managerial experience, like how that has affected your work, and have stories for talking through that during the interview process. I think at a base level interview before you actually
I think we lost Elias again.
That's attention to details.
Ooh, there he is. Yeah, cool. It's a little bit choppy. We're gonna, I think we'll move on.
Sorry.
Elias has so many good thoughts. I'm gonna direct everyone to Elias through other channels after this so you can benefit from his wisdom. Let's see, where were we? So we've been talking about the more senior end of experience, which maybe that moves us into, it feels like where we're at is sort of talking about case studies and really, you know, beginning to tell a stronger, more impactful story about your work. And so some of the questions that have come in are, what are the important items for building case studies in design portfolios, and aspects of balancing client confidentiality with creating a compelling story, and how long should a case study be? So we've definitely, and there was a question that also came in that I think is interesting to just ponder in the back as we're talking about case stories is there anything different about describing your work in the form of case studies when you're applying to an agency? I don't know. That's an interesting question. Maybe we can think about that. But Mandy, do you want to kick us off on talking about case studies?
Sure. Yeah, I definitely know a thing or two about confidentiality. So working at a bank, they are very tight-knit on confidentiality and NDAs and things like that. So definitely if you're worried about breaking any rules, one thing is to just kind of ask, you know, when you sign a contract with a client, you definitely want to know what you can and can't say or can't show. If you're not able to get the details, really, like, there are certain artifacts that they may not be comfortable with you showing. And that's okay to not show it. Again, it's talking about what was the problem, how you approached it, how did you solve it, and what was the result. So even if you don't have like the progressive step artifacts, if you can't show that, that's okay, as long as you can speak to it and show some type of results. That still works. Password protected portfolios are also a good idea. Definitely do that if the product is not in the market. You can definitely wait until the product is in the market. It's a weird one, and you definitely want to protect yourself. But essentially, it's kind of just a gut check thing of like what's appropriate or not appropriate to show. And you know, you can just speak to, this was my role, this was what the team was made of, what we set out to do, and we did this, this, and this, and then like a screenshot of the final product. That can work. I think in the beginning of my career, I was like, case studies need to be really long and really in depth, and I need to tell every aspect of the story. And then I talked to someone who was more senior than me, and they recommended, well, you know, when people are looking at your portfolio, they're really scanning and just to see if they want to start a conversation with you. That detailed story happens in the interview, and you want to save that. You don't want to show everything up front. You want to give just some summary to have somebody be interested in talking with you. So if you think of it from that perspective in terms of how detailed you go, how long it is, really as long as you get those key points and it's presented in a way that is readable, visually appealing, compelling in your result, those things will get you to the next step. And really that's what a portfolio is meant to do, or case studies within a portfolio is meant to do.
Mm-hmm.
I want to build on Mandy's answer in a way that's maybe a little bit meta, which is to think of a case study as another product that you're designing. So you have a target audience of people who are evaluating your portfolio, and they have certain needs. So like Elias said earlier in the conversation, case studies can get kind of samey. People are evaluating a lot of them all at once. And if you think about sort of what tasks a reviewer needs to do in terms of evaluating your portfolio, then you can make a case study portfolio really successful by prioritizing the things they'll be looking for. So I would say that good design in a case study is kind of a given. We're designers, we would expect that. But taking Elias's point earlier about let us know what your role was on the product. Let us know where you started, where you ended, and maybe some of the stuff that surprised you or methodologies that you used to arrive at an answer, and particularly ones that are interesting to you to explain. I think one of the things in case studies, in addition to this is something that you can, developing a user-driven mindset that I want to emphasize is I feel like I can tell when a case study is not that interesting to the person who made it. And if I can get a sense that you were genuinely excited by the problem you solved, then that is really going to hook me in and make me read all the way through the case study.
Yeah, you're actually making me think of one of our designers that is not here, but a Carbon 5 designer who's one of her previous engagements or companies she worked for was designing a site or something around end of life. And it's sort of a morose area to design in, but she just, her case study that we dove into in person when we interviewed her was just like so passionate and so empathetic that it just really spoke to me before I ever met her, because you could just really hear, like, you could tell that she really cared about this and a lot came through it. So yeah, don't choose to write a case study about something that you did not enjoy working on or that you were bored with, because it'll probably come across that way. And definitely consider the writing in your case study as well, because that is your voice. And especially if you're going to be interviewing with a consultancy, we put a lot of value on our skills, being able to communicate with clients. And so, taking the time to, just also really think about your case study as a piece of writing that is communicating clearly. Mandy, you were just raising your hand.
Yeah, sorry. I just had a question. Does anyone on the panel have a preference of like what a good number of case studies would be in a portfolio? Like, is it about 3 really strong, or 1 bigger one and 2 small ones? Or I wouldn't say necessarily the more the better, but I'm just curious if there's like a gauge in the quantity.
In evaluating for Carbon 5, I would want a range. Quantity isn't as interesting as range of industries, because that means that roughly translates to range of problems solved. One of the things that I wanted to build off Suze's point on is that when I am evaluating somebody's portfolio, I often click first on the company I know the least about. So if you are working for a really well-established company, then I feel like I kind of know your brand assets. I know what the problem space is. And I've read case studies that have really surprised me and changed my mind about that bias that I'm putting up front. But I think there's opportunities to really strengthen that writing and really put the stuff that was most interesting up front, rather than the assumption that the biggest brands are going to get you the most attention.
That's interesting. There's a question that Jason submitted a little while ago that is kind of talking about like that kind of visibility. He says, how important is branding nowadays to get a job in the world of product or UX design? For example, having a large following or presence on Medium, Instagram, Dribble, or YouTube. Like, can we talk about that sort of like star quality versus, and they don't have to be in conflict, but also I'm a workhorse and I'm getting stuff done, but it might not be the most well-known, the most sexiest. There was a question submitted earlier at the time when folks were signing up also about having a lot of experience. This was submitted by Pink Tea. 6 years of solid UX design experience. However, most of it's been in India at a startup agency. And so they're competing against designers who have worked with brands. So can you talk about that? I mean, I think that might be where a really compelling and well-designed and well-communicated case study can come into play to bring to life something that's less known on the surface. Any thoughts?
I think it's like, to get to the question about brand, I'm assuming that means like your own personal brand, and how you're showing that stuff. And I think it's nice to see that you have followings on that stuff, but then I also think that like your personality and the work you do means more to me as than actually a number of followers on Instagram or Dribble. I feel Dribble is a great place to go for inspiration, look and see what is out there, and maybe like glean a couple interesting new like UI elements and stuff like that. But I'm looking for people that I want to work with, that I know like can have a conversation with myself and with clients in ways that are effective. And oftentimes I feel that those large numbers are a slight bit of an artifice for what is not actually there. So I want to, like, as someone that's hiring generalists, like, I want to see that you can do all that stuff, but having a huge following amongst all those different social aspects of the design community isn't as big of a draw. It is nice to see, because it often means that you have like you have a level of polish and design, but with that oftentimes comes ego, which is then sometimes another situation you have to navigate when you're working with clients, and what goes in, especially in the work that we do in product design, which is iterative and agile, and things are always changing. And so the stronger someone's ego is, the harder time it is to get them to work successfully with a client and with a team. That segues into lots of things, but that's my roundabout answer. I'll pass it on to anyone that wants to go from there.
Okay. I think there's I don't know if it's a hard left, but there's an opportunity right now in our conversation. I'm just keeping track of the time. There's definitely still questions about, there's some good questions right now around sort of working remotely and what life is like now. That's also its whole subject matter that we could probably have like 5 more panels like this talking about. But why don't we dip our toe in that area a little bit, and I'll also keep track of time, and we can come back out to some of the other types of questions that aren't specifically about remote, but there's some interesting stuff, and it's certainly something that's impacting all of us right now. So when we think about how life is now, what are some, can we talk about some products and tools that work well for remote collaboration? And we've had a couple questions come up also about conducting research in a remote reality. And I would like to send that to Nikki and to Ben, who actually just presented some really thoughtful and beautiful work internally to us about a project that they've done that on. So tools that work well for remote collaboration, Nikki, Ben, and also Mandy. Curious.
So the project that we were working on, so to answer the first question about how we're handling user testing, we've been using userinterviews.com, and it's a good platform for setting up Zoom interviews, and you're going to miss a little bit of the sort of interpersonal moments in terms of building rapport, and maybe some of the moments of hesitation or confusion that you would get watching somebody really muddle through it in person. But otherwise, it is a efficient and useful proxy that I think worked really well for us. In terms of tools that work for remote collaboration, and I really want to make sure that Ben and Mandy get time on this. We've been using Figma for our entire design process for the project that we're on right now. And Figma is really built toward collaboration. But it's also the tool stack as designers that we were locked into from the beginning of the project. So I think there were sort of 2 realms of, should you evaluate a new tool because you're remote, or sort of stay locked in. And I am definitely on the side of as few tools as possible, because once you're tracking work across 5 different platforms and trying to define the work to different teams, it really eats your time and sort of loses the cycles that you could give making the product better.
Yeah, and I would just build off of that for Figma. It's been a nice catch-all tool to even just have documentation. I had to learn a little bit about React Native and understand that platform a little bit more, because we were building an app for both iOS and Android. I had 0 experience, had no idea what to talk to developers about, what things were called. So I would just copy and paste stuff in from the React Native documentation and just have a React Native for mobile Figma file just so I can reference. So it then becomes, well, you could do that in a Google Doc, you could do that in, in a spreadsheet, whatever. But it's nice because it's just a cluster of just all your info. There have been scenarios where I've found Carbon 5 created a tool called Stickies, where Stickies is a better tool in the sense of being able to either prioritize or do a retro or reflection. And it's kind of like those 2 tools have been my top ones. But in terms of Figma, I think the real interesting thing that's been happening now, it's kind of become like a virtual project room in a way where you would have a war room in your physical space, and you would have just like a bunch of stickies and things. And so Figma and that artboard in that space, because it's so vast and you can zoom out so wide and have multiple pages, you can set that up and then invite clients, invite other designers, and you can see each other's cursors, copy paste. You can drag and drop sketches in there, drag and drop images, and do a full, competitive analysis. There's a lot you can do. And because there's so much you can do with it, you can make it into whatever you want and whatever you need. So that's been fun to just uncover and see how far it can be pushed. And it's been working pretty well. I wouldn't say it's like finessed to a T, but it's definitely a better option than what's been had in the past.
Yeah, and I just wanted to heap on the praise of Figma. It's really cool. I think Nikki and I realized this on the current project we're on, that you can not only use it for that thinking, like a digital form of stickies on your wall, but you can actually like integrate it into prototypes or, maybe a deliverable for key stakeholders to see, the status we're at on wireframes, something like that. So it just has so many angles you can take on it. And it's just very flexible. And I think the other point I think we've really kind of already made it, but I just wanted to like hammer it home, is that just like with any tool, it's all about how you use it and the exercises that you take. We do have, Carbon 5 has some good resources on like exercises such as experience mapping, which can really help with like product definition and getting buy-in from stakeholders. So I think that's worth looking into. I think as a younger designer, I can speak for myself. I got fixated on tools as if that was the thing separating from me being able to do a thing and not doing a thing. But I think understanding like what you're getting at, what activities are appropriate for this specific challenge you're trying to tackle, and learning to lead those with your client is crucial. And Figma has actually been really helpful for leading most of those activities.
One thing to flag about Figma, just so you don't think we like it too much, is that getting stakeholders who are outside of building product as their domain of expertise can take a little bit of time and hand-holding. The project I was on before this one had a bunch of self-described non-technical stakeholders whose input was really crucial to the success of the product. And we ended up being flexible and adapting to them and working in Google Docs rather than working in Figma, because the range of stuff you can do in Figma was really uncomfortable and kind of paralyzing for them.
Yeah, as we've done translating of some of the activities that we do in a room with clients, whether that's in the course of the project or during a kickoff, index cards all over the table or stickies on the wall, we've done translating of those activities into a template in Figma that we can reuse across teams. And in doing so, we've identified different ways to facilitate those activities, like different roles, sort of, just doing a screen share and having our clients potentially just observing, but having more hands on deck than, in a room, you might have just one designer jumping all over the place, writing stickies and sticking them up. But as you're facilitating people through this digital tool, instead of throwing them into the tool and they're overwhelmed by everything that's in Figma, bringing on a couple other carbon fibers to be behind the scenes and help taking notes or watching. I think this could apply also to the question of like research in remote ways, like just how the role, you might bring different roles into play and assign somebody even like the job of observer, who literally is just staring at the faces on the Zoom call and trying to see when people wrinkle their foreheads or look disengaged, and helping that person who's facilitating try to manage that through these remote walls. I don't know, Ben, you just came off mute, and Mandy, maybe you have some thoughts on that since you've helped us a lot with those tools. Ben?
I was actually just I totally agree with that. I was going to follow up with a question for the panel to kind of build on the remote thing, if that's all right. So I wonder, what are the biggest challenges we've faced going 100% remote during this kind of season, pandemic season. Sounds so charming. And so, and then as a follow-up to that, what would be sort of the workarounds we've found to work to solve those problems?
A challenge, I'll go first, sorry.
Oh, go
A challenge that I've run into is that you kind of have to scope conversations a little smaller, specifically because we're on a Zoom call pretty much a good amount of the day. It's a small square. If you don't have a monitor, it's hard to really focus. And one thing that I learned, I was showing in Figma basically like a logic flow chart, and it was for a booking platform. What happened if somebody cancels? There's a 12-hour window. What if they don't show up? There's a lot of different nuances there. And so I tried to get understanding from the tech perspective as well as the product perspective, and then also try to prioritize what was most important, all within an hour. It's a bad idea. Do not recommend it. So one of the things that I've learned is to really define up front, this is the goal of the exercise, and these are the outcomes we're looking to have, and then splitting apart in scoping like what exactly you want to get from each session. What would have been more successful is like, let's review the chart. I have questions here. I'm uncertain about this. And then have that be part one. And then part two, the next day would be like, all right, I cleaned this up based on what we talked about. Now let's start to have these like little like green and red dots, and let's start to pick apart what is most important. And when you do it in that way, it helps the conversations be a lot more successful, because I did get feedback saying, hey, people were a little confused. This was, we weren't really sure where you were going with this. So being able to define the goal, define the outcomes you're hoping to have, and then splitting it apart, not trying to cram too much in an hour.
I have an answer to this that is way more interpersonally messy, which is a thing that has changed about my work in pandemic season, is that I'm tired all the time. And I have Zoom fatigue, and the opportunities for going out for coffee with my peers or having these kind of stop by your desk conversations that can unlock something, the opportunities are way smaller for that. So in order to sort of regulate my own mood and regulate how useful I am to other people, I've tried with mixed success to get out of the house more and really try and be fairly disciplined about those breaks, because they're really important to your mental health. The other thing I really want to shout out and praise Ben for doing this, which is those coffee meetings and those stop by your desk meetings can be 5-minute Zoom calls and just really quick check-ins when everybody has the availability. And every time somebody has asked that from me, I've been really, really happy with what happened, really excited to do it. I never remember to do it myself. But then when you do it, I love it.
Nice.
Always enjoy it.
Yeah. We are almost at time, like there's a minute, and I'm trying to like identify what is the perfect last thing to touch on. Is there, and there's still quite a few questions. Like I said, we'll try to get back to, we'll pick up some of these questions we didn't answer. Is there any parting advice? I think we'll probably be able to do something like this again, but just knowing that there are like 48 folks out there, a span of their career, from junior to senior, we're all trying to get it done in this time of remote strangeness and multitasking and Zoom fatigue. Like any sort of like state of the world, like parting thoughts you would share. This is a moment where I wish we could see people's faces. But anything you would share? Maybe I'm looking for sentiments like, keep on keeping on, everybody. It's hard, but we're all in this together.
Yeah, I would say, like to what Nikki and Ben were saying, definitely stay connected and connect on a human level. I think that's something that I've found difficulty in, just because and specifically I live alone. So it's just like, this is my connectivity with my coworkers and now my friends. Like I've gotten to know people just on a different level. And I would say just, you know, in your career, the people that you meet and the people you connect with is probably the most beautiful outcome of that. And being able to have those relationships, they do last. There's definitely something about solving a problem or like going through like a hard time with a coworker where you just have a bond that's just different. So definitely stay connected, meet people, and get on Zoom calls, even though, you know, Zoom fatigue, but find connections wherever you can.
Yeah, beautifully put. And I'm just like so heartwarmed because I'm watching Elias have a very human experience right behind him as he gazes at us and gives us his full attention. I'm also a parent, and so it's a crazy time, and we have to take care of ourselves and take care of each other and create spaces on our, you know, at our jobs in-house or on our client projects for humanity and empathy, and really trying to set conditions for you know, for everyone to be human in this time. Yeah. So I would like to thank our panelists here. I don't think we ever actually, so Ben is actually dialing in from Chattanooga. I'm in Oakland, California. Mandy, you are in Brooklyn. Do I have that right? Yep, Brooklyn specifically. Nikki is in LA. And Elias is in California, but perhaps not in San Francisco, but somewhere more wooded. So, so we are calling in from all over, and that's been a pleasure to me to be able to do this with you guys from across offices. It's not something that would be easy to do in normal times. And I appreciate your time. I appreciate everybody who joined us. Maybe if everyone who is interested in this could, yes, portfolio review, that's exactly where I'm going, Nikki. Thank you for reading my mind. Everybody grab a pen and a sticky or have some place next, you know, that you can type into, and we'll give you our email addresses, because one of the things we wanted to offer is making ourselves available to do portfolio reviews. We'll see what fire hose comes back to us. We'll figure out how we respond to you on that, but we wanted to make ourselves available to do some portfolio reviews and be able to give you feedback. That's normally something we do with in-person events. We will have sort of a breakout moment at the end of the evening, and we can't quite do that here. So I will start. My email is Suzanna, Suzanna, @carbon5.com. And let's see. You guys say your own, because I might.
I'm adding mine into the chat.
Oh, that's a good way to do it.
I'm adding mine as well, because my last name is very long. So putting that in the chat as well.
There we go. And while we do that, there were a lot of really rich questions. We couldn't quite get to all of them, but we will work hard to pick those up and weave those into some blog posts. And I wanted to, Ben had made mention of some of the good resources available at Carbon 5, and I wanted to direct everyone also to the blog, and you can go specifically to the design section of the blog, and there's also a product section. We work closely with our PMs, and there's some really helpful and interesting blog posts there that are helpful, that ought to be helpful and interesting to you. So thank you so much for joining us. I wish I could pull the curtain off of this and see your faces in order to say goodbye to you, but I know you're there, and I see you in chat, and really thankful that you joined us. So
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.